Joining me right now is Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Mr. Speaker, welcome back.
Thank you, Brian. Thanks for having me on.
So I just got this from one of the members. You probably know this already. After significant member feedback and discussion, the House Rules Committee will be posting soon the first of three bills that will fund America's national security interests, allies in Israel, Indo-Pacific, and Ukraine, including a loan structure for aid in Ukraine and enhanced strategy and accountability. And they're also going to put in the Rules Committee text for a form of H.R. 2, core components of H.R. 2, under a separate rule that will allow for amendments. It is it's Wednesday. What do you think about what I just told you and the possibility of getting this thing voted on and through rules?
Well, I think it can get through rules. And remember, just for your listeners, all what rules does is allow the bill to come to the floor. There's two ways bills come to the floor, under a rule or on suspension. If it comes through suspension, there's no reason to have a rule, but it has a higher threshold to pass, which is a 2/3, and you can't have any amendments.
Okay.
When it goes through rules, the threshold is 218. Okay. So you're thinking you've got a lower threshold, but rules also says what type of amendments. They usually approve what amendments you could have on the floor. So it sounds as though members are wanting to have changes. Now, H.R. 2, for your listeners, was the bill I passed that secured the border, that is sitting over on the Senate. Now, this is good in nature. This because the border is a major problem. If you really wanted to secure the border, and we need to deal with the foreign policy, the way we had it set up in October is your greatest strength is your majority. You should, as Speaker, go negotiate that with the president. And let me explain why that's stronger than trying to get some amendment on the floor. When you did the debt ceiling, and I had to negotiate directly with the president, I didn't bring Schumer in the room or Hakeem because then they become equal to the power of the speaker, and they won't agree to anything. But when we did the debt ceiling, I had greater leverage, so the president had to agree to $2 trillion in cuts. He had to give up $20 billion of the IRS money. He had to give us welfare reform, which Schumer and Hakeem said they'd never vote for. They had to give us NEPA reform, which the Democrats said they'd never go. But once the president agrees to it, then they have to vote for it. Now, if you're going this route and you think you're going to get 218 on the floor to vote for some amendment, it's much harder. The greater strength is don't bring those other leaders in. Use the power of the majority. Go right into the president. This should have been done months ago and said, look, Israel should have been funded the day after October 7th and no pay for. And because you sent a wrong message to Iran by delaying that. Now, with Ukraine, your listeners need to understand the majority of that money is going to build weapons for America that we already provided to Ukraine. So we don't want to deplete our stockpile, okay? But in there, they have also put a new provision, which President Trump, I think he was right, he made it a loan to Ukraine, right? And so the president can forgive it. There's two different times of when.
Sure.
But then you have that option. Okay. But if you want something on the border, which we desperately need, you have that leverage, and you could have got stay in Mexico. You could have got the wall finished because you'd have more than enough votes. Now, if you're just waiting for an amendment, it's very difficult. They got to wait 72 hours. You now got politics in play with it. Sitting down in the room and putting the package down is a much stronger position.
So you're not optimistic. You don't think that they have a wink and a nod that they're not going to offer a ton of amendments that are there to cripple the bill?
Well, they will offer tons of amendments to cripple the bill. People will play games now. And this is too serious a situation. Well, I had 8 Republicans play with all the Democrats to give us the chaos of what's happening there now.
That's true.
I mean, think about that. Members do things for their own ulterior motives. One raised a lot of money because he was online telling them something else. But we're dealing with a world that looks like the 1930s. This is not the situation of how you should deal with it. People on both sides of the aisle understand you want to protect America, right? The border is the number one issue. I was just I spoke at Georgetown and Harvard because I look at it like this. There are conservatives there, and I don't want them to back away, and I want to stand up to people. And when I got a question at Harvard, I said, You know how many Republicans are elected to Congress from Massachusetts? 0. But do you know your governor gave a state of emergency on what issue? The border. Do you know how far you are from the southern border? But it's the number one issue in Massachusetts. Right? So this is an issue that's so big, you should be able to win it. And why wouldn't you have leveraged Schumer to pass H.R. 2? H.R. 2 is not even getting brought up on the Senate, and it was passed almost a year ago.
Well, okay, so you don't like the fact that they're bringing up a bill that's not going to touch the Senate, because H.R. 2, as great as it is, from the Republicans' point of view, you're saying don't bring that up as a standalone because it's not going to go anywhere in the Senate?
Well, you could bring up a standalone, but it sounds like it's just going to be political fodder and not get there. I would have taken and gone to the White House and said, I have H.R. 2 here. You have your bill that you want for Ukraine. Now, let's sit down and see where we find common ground, and let's do both of these. But let's do it in the nature that it secures both. That's the greater strength that you have as the majority speaker. Now you're deciding. You're telling me on Wednesday they're going to throw this on Saturday. So how much strategy do you have behind it, and how many members do you have behind it? And you got to get 218 when come Friday Gallagher is gone and you have 217 Republicans.
So what do you, I know you're asking me a lot of questions, but you know the answers to them, and our listeners don't. Listeners don't, and I'm not sure the answers. So tell me right now, from what I just told you, and I'm just probably telling you this for the first time, what do you think the future of these standalone bills are?
Well, I think it all determines, do these standalone bills, and I'm good with standalone bills. That's fabulous. But do all the standalone bills come back together and become one bill when they go to the Senate? You're just reading this to me, so I don't know the answer to that question. That would change the outcome, because some people would put standalone bills up there that don't merge together for political fodder. I got you to vote for this, but I know this is going nowhere, and they're getting this. I don't want the Democrats I don't want to deliver just for the Democrats and not deliver for America.
So can you explain this to me? So if 4 standalone bills do a miracle, they all pass the House, the Senate looks at them, and they're not going to vote them as they are. They're going to lace them up, or they're going to weed them out, and they're going to go, I'll do everything except Ukraine, or I'll do everything except Indochina, or everything except border.
The rule in the House will stipulate whether the bills come up all individually, but after whichever bills passed, go into one bill to the Senate. That's one option. Or the rule will say all these 4 individual bills, all 4 will go to the Senate, and then they'll pick which ones they take up. I don't know the answer to that question, having not seen what they said. That would determine a lot to how you go about doing it.
So I was just talking about this right before you came on. You and I see the wisdom in Ukraine aid. It's not one of these things where America's interventionism. I think it's absolutely necessary. I know you gave one of the best foreign policy comprehensive looks at where we're at right now the day you left. So the day you left as speaker. But I'm just going to – there's a story today. They got a document from Russia that shows exactly what Russia's up to. And everything they're doing from March of 2023, they're implemented now, including getting China closer to them, by fomenting more unrest with Taiwan, by pulling out the monitors of North Korea and bringing them closer to them, getting their artillery, and creating Central and South America havoc in our own backyard to try to prove that America is no longer the leader in the world. And he ends with this. The long congressional standoff on providing weapons for Ukraine was only making it easier for Russia to challenge Washington's global power. The Americans consider that insofar as they are not directly participating in the war, then any loss is not theirs. Khodorkovsky, who was the billionaire who got jailed because he got too threatening to Putin, now out in exile, said, that is an absolute misunderstanding. A defeat for Ukraine means that many will stop fearing challenging the U.S., and the cost for the United States will only increase. Do you agree with his assessment?
Yes. If you look at history, and remember, history only repeats itself if you ignore it. If we were sitting in the 30s, that would be the exact same thing you'd be reading about Germany, Italy, and Japan as they started entering other countries. Think for one moment, when Iran made the decision to send missiles for the first time in history from Iran directly into Israel, the world has now changed. They believe they could. But would they have done it if they hadn't created a relationship with Russia and China. And what did China say? China didn't criticize it. China is now getting an advantage of all this because they are able to buy Russian and Iranian oil at a discount. And it all stems back to the leadership of Biden. Iran was only producing 4,000 barrels a day when he entered. They're now 400,000. They're now producing 300,000. That's billions of dollars a day. And China's comments coming out, they didn't criticize October 7th. China's comments coming out, too, after the missiles coming in is Israel shouldn't fire back.
Restraint.
And now the technology that they have been sharing with the drones and others and the swarming, they're being able to grow and get synergy between the two. If we think being isolationist keeps us safe, we have forgotten what happened on 9/11. If we think we take ourselves off the playing field, the world becomes safer, we have forgotten what happened when Neville Chamberlain went in for appeasement with Hitler. What we are doing right now, supplying weapons to Ukraine, not one American is dying. What's happening is Ukraine is defending their own nation from an attack. And if Putin falls, you know what happens? More freedom and safety. That means Taiwan is safe for longer. That means Iran thinks second thoughts. Go back to when President Trump took out the Iranian general.
Soleimani.
People thought, I was with him that night at Mar-a-Lago having dinner. I was with him when we went up to the skiff and identified what transpired and came back down. I know what world leaders called. Everybody else was scared. The world became safer. And you know what? Iran didn't send missiles into Israel that day or anything else because they knew the strength of America and the world was safer. When they see weakness after Afghanistan, we have pushed our allies closer to China. And we've watched the atrocities of October 7th, but those new axis of evils don't say anything negative to it because any of them could do anything they want now.
But I just think that Trump needs to read the lead story in the Washington Post today about what Russia's goals are. And I don't think he necessarily agrees with you. I think he's more for the loan, but I don't necessarily, he's up for debate, I guess. But I don't necessarily believe with you and General Keane and Lindsey Graham on this. So I think that's a conversation you guys should have. But because I know he respects your opinion. So we'll find out in these next few days. These be perilous times for the Republican Congress. Kevin McCarthy, thanks so much.
Thank you, my friend.